Both sides fighting over the desolate ruins of the city of Bakhmut in Ukraine have reported inflicting huge numbers of deaths on each other as the bitter bloodshed appears to have escalated to previously unseen levels. On Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that over 1,100 Russian fighters had been killed in the city in less than a week. He claimed that Moscow had sustained a further 1,500 sanitary losses, meaning casualties injured badly enough to be unable to continue fighting. A separate video released by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine claimed 1,090 troops had been killed on Saturday alone, possibly making it the single deadliest day for Russian forces since the beginning of the invasion in February 2022. Military spokesperson Alexander Stupin also said Ukrainian forces took out 8 tanks, 7 armored vehicles and 4 artillery systems. Russia's defense ministry released its own statement Sunday claiming that more than 220 Ukrainian troops had been killed in the Donetsk region over the previous 24 hours. Neither side's figures have been independently verified. Over the weekend, British intelligence released updates on the battle which said that Russia's mercenary Wagner Group forces had seized control of most of the eastern area of Bakhmut, and that the Bakhmutka River running through the center of the town now had become the new front line. Ukrainian forces still hold the west of the town and had destroyed bridges over the river, leaving a strip of open ground through which Russian forces would have to pass to gain further ground. With Ukrainian units able to fire from fortified buildings to the west, this area has become a killing zone, likely making it highly challenging for Wagner forces attempting to continue their frontal assault westwards, a British intelligence update read. In comments released by his press service, Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin on Sunday described the situation as tough, very tough, adding, "The closer we are to the center of the city, the harder the fighting. The Ukrainians throw in endless reserves. But we are advancing and we will be advancing." Despite international analysts deeming Bakhmut to be of little strategic importance, capturing the city would inch the Kremlin closer to its aim of seizing the entire Donbas region, one of the 4 areas of Ukraine that the Kremlin announced it had annexed in September. Bakhmut has also become something of a point of personal pride for Prigozhin, with the mercenary chief previously criticizing top Russian military officials for insufficiently supporting Wagner's efforts to take the town. But exactly how close his forces are to taking Bakhmut remains uncertain. On Saturday, the Institute for the Study of War cast doubt on how much progress Russian forces are making in the city. Ukrainian and Russian sources continue to report heavy fighting in the city, but Wagner Group fighters are likely becoming increasingly pinned in urban areas, such as the AZOM industrial complex, and are therefore finding it difficult to make significant advances, the Washington-based think tank said in a report.
Thought a lot about for a while, and now suddenly it's in the middle of things in the Middle East. And really pleased to have joining us Ray Takei, Senior Fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council for Foreign Relations. And his specialization area is Iran, U.S. foreign policy, and the modern Middle East. And Ray, we really appreciate you carving out some time. We all saw the news break rolling into the weekend with Saudi Arabia, Iran, restoring relations. And I think the surprise for everybody, the think again moment for everybody, was the deal was brokered by China. Give us a little bit of the backstory as we begin.
Well, China is one of the few of the great powers, if not the only great power, that has good relations with all the antagonists in the Middle East, particularly with Saudi Arabia and Iran. It is the largest investor in Saudi Arabia, and obviously it is partnered with Iran on a range of security and economic issues. It is a major purchaser of the Iranian oil. So for the Chinese, I think this makes a lot of sense because they can essentially establish their role as a power that can mediate disputes beyond East Asia, and it has deepened its ties to both Saudi Arabia and Iran, which are important for petroleum sales and its oil consumption.
Yeah.
For the Saudis, it's important because, they can finally get Iranians to stop hassling them, perhaps. And for Iranians, it's important because they can pretend to escape their international isolation by essentially brokering an agreement with Saudi Arabia at the time when the Gulf Arab states were thought to be realigning their relationships in the Middle East and coming closer to the state of Israel. So it's kind of a win-win for all those 3 powers.
Yeah, so interesting how that all comes together. And I wanted to get your perspective. Get a lot of people, I think, were caught a little flat-footed on this, but it clearly shows the rise of Beijing's influence in the region. Of course, the U.S. has been kind of the dominant power broker there for a long time. time. So what are the signals that are coming out of that, and what should we glean from that?
Well, China has been a major player in the Middle East in terms of its economic footprint. It has been a major investor in Iraq. It is the major investor in Saudi Arabia. It signed a 25-year agreement where if it goes through, it would essentially have a footprint in all aspects of Iranian industry, telecommunication, construction, computer technology, oil sales. So it's been very active in terms of commercial ventures in the Middle East. And now it is marrying that commercial muscle with diplomatic initiatives, sort of like, United States was a great economic power in early 20th century before it became a great superpower. And you kind of see the similar things happening where the Chinese are beginning to translate their economic muscle into diplomatic outreach to these countries. And this deal that they brokered, whether it sticks or not, remains to be seen. But from their perspective, it stabilizes their relationship with the two Gulf giants, both Iran and Saudi Arabia, both of whom are important for its oil requirements.
Yeah, and you had pointed out that China clearly wanted to flex and say, hey, we're not just an energy consumer from this region, but that we also are investing in these other areas. And as you said, flexing that muscle both financially, economically, as well as on the diplomatic front. Give us a sense of what does that mean for U.S. policy and influence in the region?
Well, since the collapse of the Cold War, since the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the regional powers can't really play off great powers against each other because those great powers didn't exist. And now the Russian Federation was obviously involved in the Syrian civil war, and its involvement was critical into survival of the Assad regime. But now suddenly these local states can once again try to play off great powers against each other. And this is particularly important for the Saudis, who would try to leverage their relationship with China in order to gain security concessions and other things from the United States. It's less of an importance to Iran because Iran really can't play off the two sides against each other. It is pretty much committed to a relationship with the Eastern countries, in this particular case, Russia and China. But for the Saudis, who have complained about American indifference to their security concerns, about American concerns about their human rights abuses, this gives some additional leverage and suggesting that they do actually have options beyond reliance on the United States. So it's particularly important for them. Now, whether they can translate that leverage into concessions from the United States remains to be seen. But nevertheless, they can play that triangular game that we saw so many countries play during the Cold War when they played the United States and the Soviet Union against each other in order to gain leverage and influence.
That's fascinating. And, history, if it doesn't repeat itself, it definitely rhymes. And this seems to be another real clear indication of that.
That's right. Yes, yeah, that's right. And for the Iranians, the calculation is different because they essentially want to be part of a new axis of resistance to the United States. Mm-hmm. And in their imagination, that axis includes the Russian Federation, obviously the Chinese government, and within the region, various other anti-Israeli and anti-American actors, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so on. So they're trying to create their own coalition within the region, but also a coalition outside the region. Right. And the relationship with Russia has obviously advanced a great deal as Iran has become a participant in the war against Ukraine. And now you're beginning to see them trying to come closer to the Chinese as well. And so this, for them, it's a kind of a different calculation. It's essentially trying to suggest that they're part of a new global realignment about countries that are resisting American sanctions and American interference in their internal affairs. Yeah. For the Saudis, obviously, it's more of a hedging strategy. Mm-hmm. For the Iranians, it's a more of an unequivocal expression of their new interest and alignment in this new relationship. Well, the nuclear program, if you recall, was not an arrangement between the United States and Iran. It was the so-called 5+1, the three European states, Britain, France, and Germany, the United States, Russia, China, and, of course, the one being Iran. Well, that coalition is no longer really in existence. The Russians and the Chinese are unlikely to pressure Iran to make any form of concessions to the United States and revive the nuclear agreement. So it further deals a blow to the agreement, which is all but dead anyways. But the sort of the notion of a 5+1 pressuring Iran into some kind of a compliance with the nuclear accord, that has already largely evaporated with the war in Ukraine. But now you begin to see that further buried in terms of international diplomacy and efforts of revival of the agreement.
Yeah, and then final question for you before I let you go. We know a lot of the Arab countries had embraced ties with Israel in a large part for the intelligence sharing as it relates to Iran. How does this impact that? What are you watching for as things continue to move forward?
Well, I suspect the Iranians have asked that for those relationships to be tempered, if not severed. I don't believe the Saudis would do so. I think they want to keep their options as open as possible. So although there are warming ties with Iran, and then we'll see if this agreement actually produces anything. But at this particular point, that would certainly be an Iranian ask in terms of limiting the scope of the Abraham Accords, if not reversing its gains. I don't see that being necessarily in the Saudi interest. I know why the Iranians would ask for it. Right. I'm not quite sure why the Saudis would yield. But the Israelis, who essentially were thinking that the region is reviving around the axis of Sunni powers and the state of Israel, they would have to reconsider that. Yeah. Because the Sunni pillar of that strategy doesn't seem to be very reliable. And frankly, it was never that reliable. But still, I think the immediate intelligence sharing and that sort of a thing is likely to continue. But the Israelis once again have to refocus their security concerns and recognize that, in the region, they still very much stand alone and have to rely on their own deterrent power to ensure their safety and security.
Great insight. Ray Takey is the Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Again, he specializes in Iran, U.S. foreign policy, and the modern Middle East. This is a complicated and complex web of allies, alliances, and a lot of strategery going along. But, Ray, we appreciate you taking time today and helping us break down this crucial set of agreements and to see if they will actually hold moving forward with Saudi Arabia, Iran, and, of course, the deal being brokered by China.
Today I spoke with the new president of the Czech Republic, Pavel. A good conversation, a conversation of partners. We discussed defense against the terrorist state, our joint defense of Europe. I thanked him for the support already provided by the Czech Republic. There are things we can still do together. I invited Mr. President to visit Ukraine. Overall, this week was, as always, active for Ukraine. Visits by the Prime Minister of Finland, the Minister of Defense of Norway, UN Secretary-General Guterres, leaders of the ruling German Social Democratic Party, and a conversation with Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. All of this yields results. In particular, we have significantly strengthened air defense. I thank Norway for this. We have new agreements on the diplomatic front. There is movement on the European integration track, as a result of the implementation of anti-corruption steps set out in the recommendations of the European Commission, including the appointment of a new director of NABU. I would like to express gratitude to our power engineers for this week, to all the repair crews, local and central authorities who were involved in the elimination of consequences of the Russian terrorist attack on Thursday. As of today, we have managed to restore the technical capabilities of electricity supply. Kharkiv has electricity. Zhytomyr region has electricity. All cities and communities that had problems with energy supply have been powered again. I thank each and every person who worked for this. By the way, our program for exchanging old lamps for new LED lamps is also being actively implemented. In total, Ukrainians have already received 12 million LED lamps. Speaking of energy saving, this volume allows us to save up to 600 megawatts of energy. This is roughly equivalent to more than half of the generation of the most powerful nuclear power plant unit. Please take advantage of this lamp exchange program. I would like to thank our rescuers from the State Emergency Service of Ukraine in Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, and in the border areas of Sumy and Chernihiv regions. To all those who are consistently eliminating the consequences of Russian shelling. Today, I would like to commend the 41st State Fire and Rescue Unit of Kostiantynivka, Donetsk region. Major Herman Starkais, Captain Serhiy Kulinchenko, Junior Sergeants Roman Dichko and Kirilo Sayenko. Thank you guys for your excellent work and courage. Of course, I am grateful to all our warriors from Khortytsia and Tavria who are fighting in the hottest spots in the most difficult conditions. In less than 1 week, since March 6 in the Bakhmut sector alone, They managed to eliminate more than 1,100 enemy soldiers, which are Russia's irreversible losses there, near Bakhmut. In addition, at least 1,500 more sanitary losses of the enemy. These are wounds incompatible with continuing fighting. Plus, dozens of units of enemy equipment were destroyed. Plus, more than 10 Russian ammunition depots were burned. I am grateful to every warrior of the armed forces of Ukraine, our intelligence, the shaman fighters, the National Guard, our border guards, everyone who is really fighting for Ukrainian land, for Bakhmut. I am grateful to the fighters of Tavria who are effectively fighting in the areas of Avdiivka and Mariinka. To the artillerymen of the 55th Separate Zaporizhzhia Sich Brigade, the warriors of the 35th Separate Marine Brigade, the 74th Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, and our 79ers, the paratroopers. And also the Zaporizhzhia direction of Tavria, the 128th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade. Thank you all, guys. I am grateful to each and everyone who again helped our soldiers this week, treated them after their injuries, searched for things to support them with, organized volunteer fundraising and sent to the front what they asked for. Together, in unity, we will achieve victory. This week there is also a movement to strengthen our spiritual independence. Society sees this. And I see the approval of Ukrainians for these steps, which are quite legitimate. And we will continue this movement. We will not allow the terrorist state to have any opportunity to manipulate the spirituality of our people, to destroy Ukrainian shrines, our lavras, or to steal any valuables from them. And one more thing. Today is the 160th anniversary of the birth of the outstanding Ukrainian scientist Volodymyr Vernadsky. A man who lived in a very difficult time, but who, despite everything, believed in Ukraine, chose Ukraine, and helped Ukraine. We are now living in a time when Ukraine can overcome all historical difficulties. We can do that, if we preserve our unity, take care of each other and our country. I thank everyone who cares about Ukraine and Ukrainians. I thank everyone who cares about our unity and the unity of the world for the sake of Ukraine. I thank each and everyone who is now fighting for the independence of our country. May the memory of all those who gave their lives for Ukraine be eternal. All those whom we remember when we say, "Glory to Ukraine." Today I conferred the title of Hero of Ukraine upon Alexander Matsievsky, a soldier. A man whom all Ukrainians will know. A man who will be remembered forever. For his bravery, for his confidence in Ukraine and for his glory to Ukraine.